Welcome to Veterans Connected, where maintenance and reliability expert and military veteran Eric Bevavino connects with fellow veterans in industry during each episode, where they exchange their experiences and discuss the transition from the military to industry and the paths and resources that led them to where they are today. The Veterans Connected podcast is proudly produced by the industry's leading network and learning community, Mobius Connect. Eric, over to you.
All right, welcome everyone. I'm Eric Bevavino, host of the Mobius Connect podcast, focused on connecting military veterans to the maintenance and reliability community. Our aim here is to bridge the understanding gap between the military and civilian worlds, thereby improving the veteran transition journey and ultimately providing hope and a helping hand to any of our brothers and sisters out there struggling to find their way. We'll do this by interviewing veterans who have successfully made it through. For this session, we've chosen to interview one such Air Force veteran, Dave Howard, whose fascinating and patriotic story is a must listen for anyone interested in joining us on this mission. Welcome, David. Thanks for joining us. How are you today?
Great. How are you, Eric? It's great to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Oh, fantastic. Our listeners can't see us on the video, but I am enjoying the picture of, is that a warthog behind you? That is.
Oh, yeah. There's a warthog, there's a U2 over here, and there's an F4 over there.
Oh, man.
So,
yeah. If you listen to some of the earlier ones, we talked about F4 maintenance, actually with Brian Debshaw. We do, contrary to what you may have heard, have had 2 Air Force veterans on the podcast out of 10 or 11 so far.
There you go.
You're the third on this pre-4th of July holiday weekend. So what's better than that?
I guess, yeah. Hopefully, like I said, I can live up to the hype.
Well, fantastic. Why don't we start out with who you are and what you're doing today?
So, my name is Dave Howard. I'm the CEO of Airbest Instruments, also one of the co-founders here for Airbest Instruments in the U.S. Been in the maintenance and reliability industry, since I got out of the military. So, and even did the same thing in the military for all intents and purposes. From upstate New York, came home to upstate New York after the military and plan on doing this for the rest of my career, at least, because I pretty much love what I do. So
fantastic. What 2 questions? What is Airbest Instruments for those of us who don't know, including myself, since I'm in lubricants, but I've been out of the maintenance and reliability consulting game for a little bit here. And so tell us about that, and also tell us what upstate New York means to you. Is it Buffalo or Syracuse
no. So
something
Airbest
quite different? Yeah, go ahead.
Airbest Instruments, our tagline is we're the masters of machine health. So we design and manufacture, and through our distribution network, sell our portable vibration and balancing instrumentation, as well as our online wireless sensor technology, our video vibration analysis technology, Dragon Vision. The wireless technology is actually named Phantom after the F4, and Dragon Vision's named after the U2. We started off building balancing machines about 40 years ago. And then 11 years ago, we said, you know what, the balancing machines are great, but if we're doing balancing, we can do so much more. So Thierry and myself and my wife sat down and decided that we were going to make a go of it. And 11 years ago, broke off out on our own and haven't looked back since.
Nice. Fantastic. And so you operate a headquarters is in upstate New York then?
Yes.
Is that anything north of New York City then?
No. So you got, New York should really be separated into like 3 or 4 different sections. You got the city, which is like Westchester and South. Then you got downstate, which is like the Catskills up to Albany. Then you got Albany North, which is upstate. And then you got Western New York, which is all, West Buffalo, Syracuse, Rochester, out where like Doug Plucknott and Tony DiMatteo and all those guys live.
So I'm familiar with the Western part. I was born and raised in Western PA, Erie County.
Sure.
Went skiing as a kid in the harsh winters of the 70s up Kissing Bridge, Cockaigne, Holiday Valley, that type of stuff. And we did some Navy Reserve diving on the historic ships ported really stuck to the pier in Buffalo, which actually they've recently had some challenges up there. But so are you from Albany then, or where are you guys now? Yeah,
we're in Glens Falls, New York.
Okay, so gotcha.
That is about 20 minutes north of Saratoga, which for all you Navy guys, everybody knows the Saratoga prototype site where they teach the Navy nuclear reactor school.
Yeah, the nukes know it. I don't know if anybody. any other Navy divers don't know it, or surface warfare guys. We know Newport, that's our New England claim to fame. But good. Okay, well, fantastic. So did you grow up there?
Yeah, so my wife and I both grew up here in Glens Falls area, and after traveling around and doing the military thing, and then after the military working for GE and some very large corporations, as well as some small ones like Comtest, we decided that when we were going to go out on our own, we were moving home. So we moved home and haven't looked back since. And our office is right here in beautiful downtown Glens Falls, and it's about 4 miles to my house, so I can't complain.
Fantastic. Well, that's great. So what led you to your military career then? What inspired you to join the Air Force after growing up in Glens Falls, New York?
So my grandfather was an Air Force veteran. He was in the Army Air Corps and then transitioned into the Air Force back in 1949, I believe, was when that transition occurred. And my uncle was also in the Air Force, and the options were limited. My mom is a retired school teacher now, and my dad's a retired millwright from working in the paper industry. And college just wasn't an option. I wasn't ready for it, number one, and number two, financially, it was not an option. So the military was a great option, and I thank my lucky stars for the opportunity, because the military taught me the foundation of what I needed to live out the rest of my career, I guess.
Yeah, I really want to expand on that too as we move further into the interview. So you grew up there. You had some family that was in the Army Air Force. That's going back, right? World War II Army Air Force, and uncle and grandfather as well. And then you decided you jump in, and how did it go from there? I mean, where did you go? What did you do?
So I joined when I was 17, and that means my parents signed the papers for me, which was great. I mean, I turned 17 on July 8th. I left on July 28th and finished basic training. I don't even remember, like September, whenever it was, and wound up first duty assignment was supposed to be George Air Force Base out in California. But when I got there, they had already moved the F4s from George to Nellis. So they ended up moving this young 17-year-old kid from upstate New York to Las Vegas, Nevada, which was an interesting ride. But I did 2 years working F4 G models. I was a jet engine specialist, worked G model F4s, the Wild Weasels at Nellis, and then deployed with those guys a number of times. Then transitioned when we retired the F4s to the A-10. Worked A-10s with the 75th Fighter Squadron and deployed with them a number of times. And then after that, went to the U-2 program, working spy planes from Beale Air Force Base and Osan, Korea, and did that for about 2 years. And then after I got out, I was recalled after September 11th and went back as a trainer, teaching the younger guys how to work on the U-2s over in Cyprus. So it was it was a fun journey. I mean, I don't know that I could have gotten that kind of experience, through college or something like that.
Very interesting. And did you say you were a jet engine tech, or what was? I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with the Air Force nomenclature. I mean, I hear things in the Army like 43 Bravo and this and that and the other thing. What's the specific rate or designator for what you did in the Air Force?
So we call it an AFSC, which is an Air Force Specialty Code, and I was a 2A373J. So a J, yeah. So a J shred out just basically means I work on all the other airplanes that are not specific to a specific letter. Like, Chris, who's next door to me, he worked AC-130 gunships. He had his own shred out, but the J shred out is kind of like hey, these are all the other airplanes that are, getting old, getting ready to retire. You're going to go work on them. So that's what I did. And I ended up getting out as an E5. I was a staff sergeant.
Oh, fantastic. I think the Air Force needs to simplify it a little bit more, like the Navy. I mean, you can be a bosun mate, first class bosun mate, or machinist mate, or anything like that.
Right.
But that's it's the corporate service, right? So you got to be more.
No, the corporate service is the Space Force. Like,
okay. We have yet to interview, so I've yet to meet anybody actually from Space Force.
When you guys are ready, let me know. I know a few people.
Oh, awesome.
So
that'd be fun. Yeah.
I'm
interested in learning. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, essentially my job was the combination of what you guys would call a plane captain and a machinist mate.
Gotcha. So you were exposed to maintenance protocols that had been built over time and, sort of the discipline, I guess, of aircraft maintenance.
Absolutely.
Which is like, from what I understand, like Navy nukes, right? Very important, high reliability,
absolutely,
high stress, and so that gave you from day one, really, from the age of just 17, 18-year-old or late 17, early 18, in your formative years. And how did that impact like what you did afterwards and really your breadth of experience? I mean, how did that enable you to get into the entrepreneurial world of maintenance and reliability condition monitoring?
It was just kind of a funny story, because when I got out of the military, I had no idea. I was like, I did my 6 years. I had my GI Bill. I was thinking, okay, now I'm ready to go to college. I moved home. And I wound up getting a job working at the paper mill with my father. And that lasted about 6 weeks. And I realized this is not what I want to do. And I spent a lot of time in my last 2 years working specifically engines and engine teardowns and engine rebuilds for the U2 program. So we would do a lot of time in the hush house, a lot of engine trim runs, a lot of balancing, vibration analysis, things like that, setting bearing tolerances, very, very precise maintenance. And so when I got out of the military, I went to go work at the paper mill. I'm like, this is like you're stepping back in time. This is, you just get a hammer and a grease gun, and that's your toolbox for the day there.
Were they using brick grease when you were there?
Dear God, yes. It was.
That's something not very many people ever get to see.
No, it's grease. Not.
Yeah,
and there were bearing housings that had felt that was left over from the paper machine shoved into the bearing housing because the tolerance was so shot. They were so beat up. Wow. And they couldn't get the bearing housings anymore because it was all cast iron material, and those paper machines were built in the 1930s.
Yeah.
So I realized very quickly that wasn't the kind of maintenance that I wanted to do, and I ended up getting recruited by GE into their they call it the JMLOP program for non-commissioned officers and officers. And I ended up getting recruited and became a gas turbine engineer at GE. And while I was at GE, worked my way through school, finished my associates, finished my bachelor's, and then went on to my master's after that, after I left GE.
Oh, right. I didn't realize GE had a program like it. Doesn't surprise me, but I don't have any exposure to GE. And I was wondering, it makes me wonder what other organizations have similar type programs. Now, GE is sort of at least at that point in time, and maybe still today, I'm just not familiar, was a quintessential sort of house for, all things good about corporate America, or at least that's what it looked like from the outside, right?
Back when Jack Welch was there, I would agree with you. So
yes. So okay. So fantastic. So you took a little bit of a meandering path, right? Coming out, your transition was probably similar to mine. Weren't sure what you wanted to do, but you had college somewhere on the horizon, and actually, hit that with a full head of steam when you were ready, right? And
Right.
blood blasted through bachelor and graduate courses and all that. And I think that's a key message here, right? Don't force it if you don't feel like you're ready. The GI Bill is not going anywhere,
Right.
right? You've earned it, you got it. So make sure that it's the right place and the right time. I know when I went through Penn State on the ROTC scholarship, and the folks who had been in the service before, they had come to ROTC, the prior enlisted, or maybe even, well, I guess it was all prior enlisted folks that were now in a commissioning program,
Sure.
were much more serious. And I suspect got more out of their college education than I did from the years 18 to 22, 21 and a half, whatever it was. And, it just makes a difference. I mean,
For sure.
I'm in an online master's program now too, and I take it more seriously. I want to get 100%.
Well, yeah, because we're,
right?
When you're 17 or 18 years old, I mean, like, I was not ready for college. There was no way. I mean, it would have been a waste of money, time, resources, everything. Where, getting out of the military at 23, it was like, okay, I'm 23 years old. I've got I've got that craziness out of my system for the most part. I've got some discipline and some rigor that, the military instilled in us, and, took it a lot more seriously than I ever would have without having gone into the military first.
Well, without a doubt, I think the military experience is something that I promote for everybody. And depending on your affiliation, you may feel like we should do the same thing that Israel does and, make it compulsory.
Mandatory service.
Yeah, right.
I'm not going to, I think 2 years mandatory service isn't a bad idea.
Yeah.
That's my personal opinion.
Well, I think we all, become adults. We're all at different levels of maturity, right, when we go in, but
Sure.
There's a consistency of where we all come out that is good and better and more disciplined and all that type of stuff. So
For
good.
sure.
So tell me more about the GE program. Then were you recruited, or how did you find that particular program? Did you start?
So what happened was
Yeah.
I was miserable working in this, archaic 1950s, a torque wrench didn't exist. It just didn't. They didn't have any precision tools, no precision philosophy. My father was a bull millwright. He would go in, and pull a couch roll or a suction press roll, and he'd do it by himself. But there was no, how do we set the tolerances? That, like, none of that stuff existed. So I just got sick of it, and I started looking around. And GE and back then, GE in Schenectady, New York, was still the home of corporate research and development, and it still is for the most part. But the gas turbine division of GE's corporate research and development, which was the Gas Turbine Technology Laboratory, ended up moving to South Carolina. But I ended up getting on board right before that happened through their recruiting program, and it was a recruiting program. My resume was uploaded through the Veteran Service Officer's office here at the local county level, and the VSO uploaded my resume, and I got a call from a GE recruiter, and they said, "Do you want to come down for an interview?" I said, "Absolutely," and the rest was history. I mean, I ended up staying at GE for like 6 years.
Fantastic. So that county level VSO was really the helpful sort of linchpin, or the way to slide your resume into the program to get considered.
Yep.
That's interesting. So, which goes to the point, there's probably, if you're looking, right, if you're out there and you're poking around, I think one of the things is there's so many resources now with everything being online. It could be difficult to tell what to do first, but maybe local is certainly worked for you.
Yeah.
Right. And looking local and finding out perhaps a smaller office as opposed to lobbing it into something in DC or some global database where it maybe may get lost in the shuffle, may help you find a local job too. And I think a lot of people go home right after they're done with their time in the service. They want to get back to their roots, their family support, which is also helpful if you got kids and it's a busy world, right? So Interesting. Okay, so you followed that route. You got into GE. How long were you at GE then before you transitioned to your next
About 6 years.
venture? Okay.
Yeah, it was fun, and back then it was a good company. And what ended up happening is I worked in through continuous improvement. They put me through my Six Sigma program, Six Sigma green belt, black belt, all of that. I learned a lot about, so transitioning from the military to like a corporate structure was not that hard for me, because in the turbine laboratory, there was a Coast Guard that was the fire control operator. There was a Coast Guardsman that ran the fire control. There was a combustion engineer that was a former Navy aviator. There, you know what I mean? Like, so it was like we were all kind of, we just kind of all got along together. It was weird. It was almost like you were on a ship or something, because the combustion engineer would say, bring it up to 2,700 degrees. And then I remember Billy Cogan, the Coast Guard guy, going, 2,700 degrees, aye, sir. And it was like,
you get a little nautical pirates of the Caribbean plus US Navy and Coast Guard combined. Captain.
We had Coast Guard, Air Force. We even had an Army guy that worked with us too for a while. He was an Abrams tank mechanic. So it wasn't that hard. I think the hardest part was when I left that position within GE. That's when I really had to like transition, because that was a lot of military recruit people went into that kind of engineering field. And then I was like, oh, wow, I finished my bachelor's degree. What's my next career move? I'm going to go be an operations manager for a rebuild facility in Houston for GE. Well, that was a union shop. So there was collective bargaining. I was a former military guy with literally no labor management experience, especially a collective bargaining labor unit. So I had to learn very quick, very fast, and thankfully had some very good mentors along the way.
Interesting. Yeah. So similar to perhaps going into a Department of Defense job or a civilian contracting with the military, right? That's an off ramp that a lot of people choose, especially if they've been in the military for a long time, say 20 years. They know other people, and I know in the diving community that sort of is a self-fulfilling prophecy. But for folks like you, got off back to duty in 6 years, I got off in 4, and that my soft sort of off ramp was, yes, I joined the corporate America and business development, but I stayed in the reserves. Sure. Right. So you found another community that was military oriented until you went to Houston. Now I'm really interested in learning more about how your Navy experience and your leadership either helped you or I mean, was it hard to?
It was very hard.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
It was very hard because, when you're out on the flight line in the military and you have, you're a junior NCO, I was a junior non-commissioned officer. So I had direct reports. I had, about 20 crew chiefs that worked for me on B flight. And, you tell somebody, hey, you know what, go out and pull the hellhole panel and change the bellows canister on 561. Everybody goes, okay, no problem, got it. Where in the civilian sector, especially when I went to Houston, you couldn't tell somebody to do something. You had to ask somebody to do something. And that's a very different way of thinking. So you have to understand I had to learn what motivates people, how to get them to engage and to really be effective at their job and love their job, because it's not the same. The people, there's different motivational factors, especially in that particular environment and in that collective bargaining environment. So I had a great mentor that was an HR director at GE, and she was also at that time a retired, I think she was either a lieutenant colonel or a colonel, I don't remember, but she kind of took me under her wing, and her name was Diana Godfrey, and she kind of just brought me under her wing, showed me, the ropes on how to deal with people, because my people skills were very limited at that time. It was all military focused. Even after the military and my initial job at GE, it was all military. So then I was lunged into this workforce where, maybe there was 4 or 5 guys out of the 70 or 80 that worked for me that had been in the service. So it was a difficult transition, but like I said, finding a good mentor really helped me through that. And the first year was tough. The second year was a lot easier because I had kind of figured out what works and what doesn't work.
Well, and I think that's key learning as well. Two really, really important things that you highlighted here is to first off, realize that you're in a new place. There's probably 3 things. Realize that you're in a new environment that it's like, okay, danger, Will Robinson. These people didn't sign enlistment oaths here, and I'm going to obey the orders of those appointed above me, right? And okay, so you realize you're in a different environment. You're find an HR partner, which is becoming more and more, I would say, helpful and common today, even though guys, you have your HR partner in your office, which happens to be your life partner. But it's a good metaphor, right? especially for folks who are really driven by mission accomplishment. I mean, and I've experienced some of this too, right? That we're so driven on fulfilling the mission and one team, one goal. When we start swimming in this different pond that is corporate America, it can be frustrating. It can be like, whoa, who do I trust? What's going on here? And it can be a new skill set for people to learn. It's not a reason to give up or to bail out, right? It's certainly a reason to get to the next level vertically in your maturity and management and all that type of stuff. So that's cool. That's a great example of taking your military experience and then adapting to a new circumstance. Yeah.
It was definitely like we weren't in Kansas anymore, but at the end of the day, it was, that mentor really helped me get through that kind of stage of my career development.
Yeah. And we all need it, right?
For sure.
I mean, especially in corporate America. I don't know how it was at GE, but I've seen precious few examples of sort of middle management and then executive leadership training, like, in the Navy. And I've heard about this in the Air Force and the Army and the Marines as well. When you get to a certain point, you go to school to learn how to be a department head or to be a CO or an XO of a unit or even a staff officer, general officer as you move up in the ranks. And in the outside world, man, you got to lean on other people, right?
Well, you got to lean on other people, or you got to teach yourself. The military, I remember I went to Airman Leadership School. Airman Leadership School prepared me to become an NCO. I went to NCO Leadership School to become a better NCO, whereas good luck finding that, but in the corporate world, at least. But there are other programs out there. Like, we were just talking about it, my wife and I, today. Our local Chamber of Commerce has a thing they call Leadership Adirondack, and it's a great program to take, kind of middle management people or middle leadership people within an organization and give them the opportunity to, build on their skill set. So we're actually going to be sending one of our, maybe 2 of our people to that through that program, because the businesses in the world today don't seem to have that kind of approach. It's like they're looking for somebody who already has all of that. They already went to school, they already have the experience. Let's hire that person.
Well, without a doubt. And I think, as we evolve past the pandemic, there's so many challenges in business today, not the least of which are system challenges and,
for sure,
and the IT and technical systems that are there supposed to help us. Then, sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. I'm sure Dragon and Phantom are working just the way they should. But not all leaders and managers, even if they are completely capable and cut out, may not even have the time to engage in the way they want. So I think executive coaching, I think this leadership and Adirondack, I mean, what's available to you locally, and then the training that you got in your pre-NCO school, your NCO schools in the Air Force to, at least be aware of what's going on. So were you automatically sort of considered, were you considered for a managerial position because of your experience in the service, do you think, or that combined with your experience in your first assignment at GE? I mean, how did you get to that leadership job in Houston?
Well, it was a combination of the military service for sure, but then also, performance within the technology laboratory.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I had 3 years of proving myself within that position to be able to show, the senior leadership that I was the right cut of cloth, so to speak, for the next level. And, as soon as at GE Corporate America, oh, wow, you got to the next level. If you want to get to the next level, you got to get a master's degree. And it's like, oh, okay, I'll play the game. But that's kind of the way that it works. It's and I have a very similar philosophy here. I would love to hire. In fact, we try to hire military whenever we can. The biggest problem right now is finding good candidates.
Just in general, right?
In general,
yeah.
You get 12 applications, all of them scheduled for an interview, and 2 of them show up. It's like, well, I don't know how to fix that.
Yeah, well, that's a societal issue, I think. And so you're in the middle of this too, and perhaps from this podcast, more transitioning veterans will hear that you're hiring, and they'll contact you, and maybe you'll get some more out of it, because I think really the precarious place in the transition is figuring out what that first job is, and in your experience is not dissimilar to many that we hear from, that okay, I went to the paper mill, and within 2 years or maybe within 6 months you figured out that was not where you belonged, right? But it was like that, I got to check this box, I got to make sure I've got food on the table and everything's
for sure
rolling, whereas perhaps with some mentorship from somebody in the military who had already been through it, or if you're connected and somehow then, and I haven't met a vet yet that's not willing to help people coming out of the military. Sure. So
and there's also there's all these other organizations too. I mean, the VFW has their own VSOs, the American Legion has their own VSOs. I'm involved in both of them. It's really sad. I mean, I don't know how it was when you got out, Eric, but when I got out of the military, I remember going through the Transition Assistance Program office. And it was like, here's a checklist of stuff. Here's how to write a resume. Here's how to submit your resume. And do you have any questions?
Good luck. Yeah.
Good luck. Thanks for the last 6 years. That's kind of what it was back then. And now I don't know if it's changed that much, but I know that it's far more digitized. So when somebody is getting out, like we work with local VSOs within the Transition Assistance Program offices, and they all have connections to industry locally. So, there's a huge Fab 8 chip plant right here near us in Albany, New York. And that's a huge recruiting source for a lot of people that are retiring from like the 109th Air Wing and other local units. So,
and once somebody gets in, that's part of the tribe, right? Then they can pull out and recruit and perhaps, their circle of friends and draw them in with them.
Our VP of engineering is in the office right next door to me, and he was an AC-130 gunship crew chief, and I've known him for close to 20 years. I was the best man in his wedding. So
yeah, there's a lot of trust in common language, like Jordan and Pippen out there, right? You guys know each other. You've known each other for a long time. He knows when you're going left, he goes right, and you cover it. Yeah. Yep. So good. So did you go directly into entrepreneurial adventures
No,
after GE, or where'd you go after GE?
no, I went to go work for Allied with John Schultz.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
Great guys. Yep.
yeah, great guys. Him and Chris Klosterman. Chris Klosterman was and John were both great mentors to me. Taught me a lot. And then after that, went on. I thought, okay, well, I'm going to take this everything that I've learned and let me see if I can apply this to like maintenance management. So I took on a role as a maintenance manager at a chemical plant, and then plant manager of the same chemical plant. And then out of nowhere, got contacted by Jack Dishner and John Cochran from Comtest, and they asked me, because of my vibration and balancing and everything else, if I'd be willing to come along on the ride of bringing Comtest from New Zealand into the US. So I did that. And then GE bought Comtest, and that's when I said, "That's it. I've had enough. I'm
Not going back. I'm only going forward.
Yeah. I'm only going forward." So that's when we took the leap and went out on our own, and we've been there for 11 years now, and it's been it's crazy. I remember our first year in business, and then about 2 years ago, I was like, we did what we did in our first year in business in 1 month. Because that's how the business has grown. And it's been a fun journey. I think the entrepreneurial part, one of the things that, again, it was mentorship. Throughout my whole career, I've had great mentors: John, Chris, Joe Torra at GE, Mr. Dave Dyson at GE, and then most recently, John Cochran from Comtest. And the funny thing is none of these guys were military. So I had all these mentors, but I think I picked these mentors because they had something I didn't have. I had this military mindset of like, take the hill, and they had this more business acumen, very strategic philosophy that I said, you know what, that's something I didn't learn in the military. So I absorbed as much as I could, like a sponge, from people like that. And then when I was ready, went out on my own. Jason Tranter has been a great mentor of mine over the years. I mean, he's probably one of the smartest guys in the industry, and he was very helpful and very instrumental in helping me just get to where I am today.
That's that awareness, the aspiration for lifelong learning, and seeking out people that can help you, not to be threatened by them, right, as a competitor or anything like that. Like, gee, I'd like to learn this. And I mean, in your experience, have any of those folks said, "No, sorry, don't have time, I've already got 45 people I'm mentoring," or they're like, "Oh, you're the first person who asked, come on"?
No, I think that's the interesting thing, is everybody that I've always kind of hitched my wagon to from a learning perspective, they've always been ready to teach, and I think that's just in the inherent nature of that personality type. Mm-hmm. Jason is a teacher, John Schultz is a teacher, John Cochran is a teacher. That's what they love to do. They love to share their knowledge, and I'm hoping, throughout that kind of mentorship, I'm able to pass on a little bit of what I've learned from them in my career to others.
What great examples of leadership, right, in the industry. And I think that's the common theme and the common thread, and certainly exposed to good, bad, and medium, average, I would say, leadership in the military. Of course, above average. I mean, I think the military has the best leadership program in the world. Perhaps whether or not everybody takes it on appropriately or not is another question, but at least that exposure can perhaps give you a clue or a hint as to the people around you that might be able to help out. So that's great, and I'm sure those folks will be happy to hear that you mentioned them, and that they are a part of your success, and they're probably delighted to see how you guys are doing today. So, all right. So let's take a breath here and see where we're at in the process. We got a few more minutes left, and I've got a few more questions here. So let's see. Let's talk next, Dave, about what advice you would give to any service member planning to transition to the civilian world that you wish you had when you made the move.
I would say that the best advice is when I got out, I didn't have someone to kind of guide me along the way. And like you had pointed out, Eric, there's a lot of people that get out of the military and then they go take a GS job, or they go take a defense contractor job or something like that, right? Had I thought about it, I mean, gosh, I could have done the same thing, but I didn't think about it. All I had was a tunnel vision focus of, I've been gone for 6 years, I want to go home. And had I thought about it, I probably could have, very easily gone into Lockheed or something like that, because I knew guys that had retired and had gone to work for Lockheed on the U2 program as civilians. So I could have done the same thing. So from an advice perspective, I would say the most valuable advice that I wish I could have given myself back then is don't have tunnel vision. The military taught us to be open-minded and be very, globally aware, so to speak. So, don't be, oh, I've been gone for 6 years, I just want to go home. Maybe there's something else out there that you're completely missing.
That's interesting. And I mean, I can relate. It was the same way, right? So coming out, I'm like, okay, well, what is common sense at that point in my life, young, mid-20s? What should I do? Okay, well, NOAA has a diving program, so let's apply to NOAA. I think I like the high speed stuff, so I'm going to go apply to the Secret Service, which I did, and that took forever. And I might have gotten a job offer, I don't know, but it took too long, and I already had another job. I can drive a ship, so can I be a tugboat captain? And I think maybe what you're pulling on a thread here is that seek connections or seek connectivity as opposed to looking for a job. It's just like, let's go straight for the hardest possible answer. Let's go find a job for me, and I know what I need and I know what I want, because we don't at that point, we really have no clue, and we're trying. So what happened to me, Navy diver, surface warfare guy, I mean, you went in, you were aircraft, like precision maintenance all over the place to a paper mill. I went from ship driving, Navy diving to selling lubricants, right? So it's like, how can you conceive how those two link up? Yeah, it'd be better if you jumped into a tribe of mentors, so to speak, or you figured out that network connectivity in the area that you want to be, or within the group that you're exiting. It just, as I think back upon it, it just became this, okay, the service is behind me, they're back there, I'm out here kind of by myself. It sounds like you had the similar thing, but at least, you connected back home with your dad and some folks. Yeah.
I think the other thing was like when I came home, I remember very specifically, it was like, all right, I'm going to use my GI Bill. So I walked into Excelsior College here in New York, and I handed them my DD-214, and I said, what is this worth? And they were like, they did an evaluation. They were like, oh, so you need to take humanities and Western Civ or whatever it was. It was I think that's what they were, Western Civ and humanities. And they were like, you can have your associate's degree. And I was like, what's my associate's degree going to be in? And they're like, maintenance technologies. I'm like, well, it sounds like I'm going to be heading into the maintenance career path, because that's what I had done.
Oh, interesting. So they had some sort of system to evaluate your Air Force, like your designator or your
well, rating, they take your DD-214, and there's a lot of colleges that do it now, but like 20 years ago that there wasn't. So like Excelsior College was the only one that I knew of, and that was because the VSO turned me on to them. So I walked in, handed them my DD-214, and walked out an hour later, enrolled in 2 courses, and that was it. So I would say, from an advice perspective, don't cut your military training short either, because that military training, no matter what you've done, I don't care if you were handing out basketballs at the gym, that military training has academic equivalency. So don't be afraid to walk into, University of Phoenix or your local community college or whatever and find out what that's worth, because it's worth something.
Without a doubt, without a doubt. And not only is that it sounds like, and I don't have this experience, but it sounds like from your experience that universities perhaps have a rating system where they can draw those equivalencies
Absolutely.
like automatic, like there's already a system in place, whereas corporate America in translating a resume does not have that, right? Does not have that. So great. And it sounds like the VSOs are really a key part of your transition and getting you into the right zone. So that's great guidance. Okay. So you've had experience, wow, through, a bunch of large, medium, and small organizations. Excuse me, transitioning into a large organization with military people in it already is kind of, it's kind of like the same thing, but then you went around and did other things. What guidance would you share with anybody trying to hire folks out of the military to help them connect with veterans appropriately?
I would say that the military veteran brings such a unique skill set to the table, both in terms of discipline and rigor and accountability and teamwork. Like those are things that those things don't get taught, especially in university or in high school or trade school. Those things aren't necessarily taught. Whereas when you have those skill sets coming out of the military, because it's just deeply ingrained in your psyche, like those things are worth something. And I would take a military veteran that handed out basketballs over a bachelor's degree engineer for, an engineer, not necessarily an engineering position, but maybe like a customer service, customer support, something like that. I would take one of those guys over the other because, quite frankly, I know that I can count on them. So understanding that work ethic and accountability and discipline and rigor is something that, as an employer, there's nothing more valuable than those like 4 or 5 elements for a good employee.
Yeah, you touched on this. This is the resiliency, the accountability, yes, I need to be up and at them at a certain time so I can fulfill my duties to my coworkers and the people who are paying my paycheck. Absolutely.
It's irreplaceable. You can't teach those skills. I can try to teach those skills, but it would make me want to become a drill instructor, and I don't want to do that.
Right, exactly. So even in your 6 years enlisting at 17, you also had leadership experience, right? With couple people, maybe up to 10 or 20 or 50 or 100 or whatever.
I had 16 guys on the flight line over in Al Jaber, Kuwait, in the desert as a 22-year-old NCO. It was weird, but you grow up very fast in the military. There's no doubt about that, because there's no room for childish behavior.
Yeah, that's right. People die, right? Yep. You're on the wrong end of that jet engine, when you're walking across the flight line. Actually, I've got a Vietnam vet friend of mine who actually saw a helicopter pilot who was coming back from a mission and was not thinking right or whatever, walked into a tail rotor and
situational
not good. Yeah, not good. Right. So you make a mistake like that when you're walking around Kroger, it's not that big of a deal, but when you're in the wrong end of a machine gun or a jet engine or a helicopter, you could be in trouble. So
it's also the like working on jet engines or working on like a Navy nuclear reactor. I imagine they're kind of a similar philosophy, because if something goes wrong, people die.
Yeah.
That's the reality of it. People are counting on you. My pilots, one of my best friends to this day was one of my pilots in the Air Force. And, he's a great guy. I still talk to him on Facebook mostly, but, he taught me a lot. And he wasn't much young. The crazy thing was, Eric, is he was not much older than me.
Yeah, right on.
He was an A-10 pilot. He ended up going to the academy, and he got out of the academy, went through flight training and everything. I think he might have been, when I was 22 or 23, he might have been 26. Eric Grace, just a great guy, and those guys count on us to keep the plane in the air.
That's right. That's right. There's no more important mission than that.
For sure.
He's got to be able to focus on launching artillery downrange or depleted uranium rounds through tanks or whatever you're shooting at, right? And not worried about whether or not the engines are going to work.
For sure. Exactly. That's the least of his worries. I don't want to worry about that engine. I want to make sure that I've got enough, that the gun's going to fire when I want it to, that all pylons are going to dismount when I want them to. And it's I miss it, but that's also why, even in the culture that we've created at our company, it's a very similar philosophy. It's everybody's counting on each other, and when somebody's not here, it's noticed, and everybody, we all work together. It's that it can't be duplicated, but it's close.
Yeah. Well, lives aren't on the line if an invoice doesn't go out properly, or somebody doesn't pay their bill in 45 days or something like that. And I think that's, this is a key point that you've brought up, that when you're in the high risk environment and the stakes are high risk, high stakes, there tends to be a sense of urgency, less patience with non-performance and that type of thing. And I think that's really, really important for folks to get their head around as they come out of the military, so they're just not anxious and aggravated all the time. And a lot of these guys and girls are like, well, I just can't take this. I got to get back into whatever I was doing in another capacity, either as a contractor or whatever, right? And at the end of the day, you can do a young person's job as long as you're young, right? And things just don't work the same at 55 as they did at 25, and it's a little harder to recover. So eventually, getting your mind around that, and letting life mature and take its path is also important. So great point. Sure. Great point. So Dave, what haven't we covered today that you wanted to make sure you related to listeners as you and your PR director over in your corner helped out? What have we missed today?
Well, I think the biggest thing is, like, when you're getting out of the military, be selectful. Don't jump at the first thing that, the first opportunity that presents itself, because there are so many great opportunities with great companies that value that military leadership experience and that military experience, that, not jumping at the first one it's okay, because you will find the right fit. And if you don't know where to look for the right fit, look to your VSO, look to your VFW, look to your American Legion, contact some of your former colleagues from the military that have gotten out and gone through this process themselves. Don't be afraid to step outside the box. I was lucky. I consider myself very lucky, because I found a job that was close enough to where I felt like I had that camaraderie and that teamwork. And it helped me transition quicker. But I also know some other guys that haven't found that, and they go into things like, for a while, I was a volunteer EMS guy. So I was an EMT. Well, that's a very brotherhood type focus, where, you get that camaraderie and people are counting on you type thing. That you can find those types of things. They're not that hard to find. Even if your job doesn't have that, you can find something else that can fill that void. Maybe it's at the VFW, or volunteering as a firefighter, or something like that.
Two great points there. I mean, there's other brotherhoods and sisterhoods out there.
Yeah.
Whether it's the police, firefighters, EMS. I mean, there's other brotherhoods of just volunteering.
Absolutely.
Right, for veteran causes, right? So, and then the other point, I love it, beautiful. Be selectful, be patient, don't settle. Right. Don't settle. I mean, the worst thing that could happen out of it is that you get into a negotiating position where you make more money,
Right?
right?
Or you wind up at a paper mill.
Yeah, play hard to get a little bit, right? Play and because it is a hot job market. Not only if it wasn't a hot job market, but the thing that really happens is if you tend to anchor yourself perhaps at a lower point than you should be. If you settle, find out more, ask questions, negotiate, and if it doesn't feel right culturally, it probably isn't right.
And if you're interviewing and they don't put the value on your military experience that you think it's worth, and we all know it's worth, find another interview.
Yeah.
If you can't get across to them that my 6 years in the military is worth a 2-year degree or worth a 4-year degree, and they can't conceptually understand that, you don't need to be interviewing with them. Find somebody else that gets it.
Yeah, that's right. Spot on, man, for sure. Because you get involved in a bad situation. It's no different than, getting involved with the wrong life partner, right?
That's right.
You got to at least for 6 months, maybe 2 years, maybe longer. And, you don't want it to become a regret. So set out on the right foot for sure.
That's right.
And with eyes wide open. So good. Well, Dave, I sincerely appreciate you taking the time to talk to me and help us on this mission. How can folks get a hold of you if they want to learn more? Are you on LinkedIn? And
yep, you can look me
media?
up on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. You can look me up on our company website, airbest-instruments.com, and my email address, mdavid@airbest-instruments.com. Always available, always happy to help, and especially for any of my brothers and sisters that are getting out and they're looking for maybe just advice, I'm happy to help.
All right. True patriotic American coming up on the 4th of July here. Before we close out, I want to remind our listeners that please give us a 5-star rating. Both Dave and I would appreciate that because that'll help on the podcast. And also we've got Mobius Conference in Indianapolis coming up middle of September. So I believe there's going to be a veteran track there too. So anybody listening that wants to learn more can find out more through the folks at Mobius. Thank you, Dave. And thank you,
Thanks,
Mobius.
Eric.
Yeah, thanks, buddy. I appreciate it, brother. And thank you, Mobius, for providing this platform to help both transitioning vets as well as those looking to hire them in the field of maintenance and reliability. Have a great 4th, everybody.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Veterans Connected. We will see you back for another episode very soon. In between, we hope to see you in the Veterans Connected community group where you can meet Eric and fellow podcast guests and share with other industry veterans at mobiusconnect.com. And we hope to see you there.